My name is Margaret. I'm 23 and I recently graduated with honors in technology engineering from a prestigious university in Massachusetts. You'd think that would be a moment of celebration, right? For most people, maybe. For me, it was a harsh reminder of just how disconnected my family had become. On my graduation day, I stood alone among a sea of beaming parents and supportive families. No one from my family showed up. No flowers, no congratulations, not even a proud glance. Just a single clipped text from my mother. Your father says that since you chose your own path, you should take full responsibility for it. The words felt colder than the New England wind biting at my bare arms. That evening, I returned to the vast mansion I once called home. It's a place where everything gleams under the cold stare of crystal chandeliers, but warmth is a foreign concept. As I stepped through the marble-floored foyer, my father stood at the top of the grand staircase. His graying hair perfectly combed, his tailored suit as sharp as ever, holding a glass of red wine he never actually drank, a mere prop for his ever-staged life. So he said, his voice echoing through the cavernous hallway, "You're really turning down the position at the firm?" "Yes," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to pursue energy engineering. I don't want to work in finance." He raised an eyebrow, his lips pulling into a tight, dismissive line. "Engineering." He said it like it was a dirty word, his tone dripping with the disdain of a man who measured success only in dollar signs and quarterly earnings. "You want to be some mechanic tinkering with wires and circuits. You'd rather do that than uphold the Preston legacy." His words hit like a slap, each one reminding me of the long, suffocating shadow my family's name cast over my life. "I want to create something real, something that actually makes a difference," I shot back, my pulse thudding in my ears. "I don't want to just shift numbers around on a balance sheet." He let out a bitter, humorless chuckle, the sound echoing off the polished walls. Then, as if he'd been waiting for this very moment, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick wad of cash. He tossed the bills onto the marble floor at my feet, the money scattered, fluttering like dry leaves on a cold autumn day. There he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. $200. That's all someone like you is worth. No more trust fund. No more Preston name. Nothing. I stared at the crumpled bills on the polished floor. It wasn't the money itself that hurt. It was the way he threw it, as if I were nothing more than a failed product, a broken cog in the well-oiled machine of his meticulously controlled world. My mother stood a few steps behind him, a second glass of wine in her hand, her eyes glazed with the kind of apathy that comes from decades of quiet surrender. She said nothing. No defense, no whispered plea for understanding. Just the clinking of her glass as she took a slow, measured sip. I bent down, my movements slow and deliberate, and picked up the bills. I felt the cool paper between my fingers, the sharp corners pressing into my skin. I straightened, meeting my father's icy stare. "Thank you, Father," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing in my chest. "I'll turn this $200 into something greater than you ever imagined." He flicked his hand toward the door, his expression already shifting back to that of a man bored by the trivial drama of family. "Get out," he said, turning away as if the conversation was already forgotten. "You're no longer a Preston." I turned on my heel, pulling my only suitcase behind me. The heavy oak door closed behind me with a final echoing thud, sealing off the life I had been so desperate to escape. I walked down the stone steps, each footfall a step further from the life I had known, a life built on brittle facades and empty promises. The car I had used during college was gone, repossessed the moment I crossed that threshold. I had no car, no home, not even a bank card in my name. Just $200, an old laptop, and a head full of half-finished engineering blueprints. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I looked up at the cold gray sky. The wind whipped my hair around my face, sharp and biting, but I didn't flinch. I took a deep breath, letting the cold fill my lungs, clear my head. $200 and a dream. That's what I had. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. I boarded the last night bus out of Boston at 11:20 p.m. My destination, San Jose, the beating heart of America's tech industry. The journey lasted over 70 hours, a blur of rest, stops, cracked vinyl seats, and the soft, rhythmic hum of tires on endless highways. I barely ate, surviving on cheap crackers and the kindness of a stranger who handed me a half-full water bottle when I looked like I might collapse. When I finally stepped off the bus in San Jose, I had less than 120 left. No contacts, no plan. Just a suitcase, an old laptop, and an idea that had refused to die even in the darkest corners of my mind. I dragged my suitcase out of the station and found a small park nearby. I sat down on a worn wooden bench under a sprawling oak tree, the sun dipping below the skyline, casting long, jagged shadows across the pavement. That night, I slept with my laptop as a pillow and an old scarf pulled tight against the chill. I didn't cry. I didn't curse my family. I just lay there, the city lights flickering through the branches above me, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. The first night in San Jose felt like a strange, unsteady kind of freedom. I woke up on that park bench stiff and cold, my back aching from the hard wooden slats. The air was crisp, tinged with the smell of wet grass and distant exhaust fumes. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and looked around, my breath misting in the morning air. I was broke, homeless, and utterly alone, but for the first time I felt like my life was truly my own. With a few crumpled bills in my pocket and my old laptop in my bag, I knew I had to move fast. I found a small convenience store nearby and spent 7 of my dwindling dollars on a cup of gas station coffee and a stale breakfast sandwich. I took my small meal to a nearby plaza, settling onto a sun-warmed bench where I could see the early morning bustle of the city. As I sipped my bitter coffee, I opened my laptop and stared at the blank digital notebook on the screen. For a moment, I hesitated. My father's words echoed in my mind, his cold, dismissive tone still fresh like a wound that refused to scab over. But I pushed the thoughts aside and typed 3 lines, each word hitting the keys with a quiet, determined click. I will never use the Preston name to achieve anything in life. I will create something that changes how the world uses energy. When I return, it will be on my own terms. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and looked around. The towering glass buildings in the distance seemed to hum with potential, their windows glinting in the morning sun like polished shields. The whole city felt alive, a place where ideas sparked and dreams were built from late nights and stubborn hope. I spent the entire day wandering through downtown San Jose, moving from one tech startup to another, my eyes scanning every help-wanted sign and job listing on coffee shop bulletin boards. The rejections came fast and harsh. No experience. Sorry. We're looking for someone with a proven track record. We're downsizing, can't take on new staff. You're an engineer. This is a marketing firm. Each dismissal felt like another layer of that old familiar rejection, but I refused to give up. As the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched long, I found myself at a small cafe called Rust and Bean. The place had a worn, homey vibe. Faded brick walls, scratched wooden floors, the soft hiss of an ancient espresso machine struggling to keep up with the evening rush. And I bought the cheapest thing on the menu, a $2 iced tea, just to justify my presence as I tapped into the free Wi-Fi. My old laptop groaned to life, its fan whining like a tired old engine. I started searching for tech internships, part-time gigs, anything that might keep me afloat for the next few weeks. As I stared at the flickering screen, my mind drifted to the energy project I had been obsessed with during my final year of college. It was an idea I had scribbled in the margins of notebooks, a vision for a new kind of battery, one that could store renewable energy more efficiently and sustainably than anything currently on the market. I had called it Aurora, a name inspired by the shimmering lights of the northern skies, the kind of beauty that felt both untouchable and inspiring. I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't notice the cafe owner, a tall man with a salt and pepper beard and an easy smile, struggling with the coffee machine. The old beast was making a strange, high-pitched whining noise followed by an occasional ominous clank. "Need a hand?" I asked, pushing my laptop to the side. He hesitated for a moment, eyeing me up and down, probably wondering if a girl barely out of college could really help with his temperamental machine. But desperation must have outweighed doubt, because he stepped back and gestured to the counter. "Be my guest. It's been acting up for days." I leaned in, listening to the hiss of steam and the uneven whir of the grinder. I popped the side panel open and quickly found the problem: a misaligned pressure valve causing the entire system to strain under its own weight. A few quick adjustments, a slight turn of a stubborn bolt, and the machine whirred back to life, its steady hum, a stark contrast to its earlier death rattle. The owner, whose name I learned was Chuck, gave me a slow, appreciative nod. "You've got a sharp ear, kid. You looking for a job?" I blinked, surprised by my own luck. "Actually, yeah, I am." And just like that, I had my first job in San Jose. Maintenance assistant at a struggling cafe, paid in cash under the table, but enough to keep me from starving. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. Over the next few days, I became a familiar face at Rust and Bean. I cleaned the old espresso machine, fixed a broken blender, and even rewired the flickering neon open sign by the window. Every dollar I earned went into a small, carefully folded stack in my backpack. My emergency fund, my escape plan. Late at night, after the last customers had left and Chuck had locked up, I would sit in the corner booth, my laptop glowing in the dim light, working on the designs for my Aurora project. I refined the schematics, running rough simulations, and jotting down every idea that popped into my head. I had nothing but a dream, a half-baked concept, and an unshakable belief that I could build something real. One evening, as I sketched out a potential circuit design on the back of a napkin, a voice broke my concentration. "What are you working on?" "Looks like a treasure map," said Maya, the cafe's only waitress. A sharp-eyed, fast-talking girl with a streak of blue in her hair. I looked up a little startled and flipped the napkin over, embarrassed by my messy scrawls. "Just an idea I have for an energy storage project." She leaned over, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the rough looping lines and hastily scribbled notes. "Huh, looks complicated, but kinda cool." She straightened a small smile pulling at the corner of her mouth. "Keep at it. You never know what might come of it." As she walked away, I felt a small flickering warmth in my chest. The first real spark of hope I had felt in weeks. I flipped my laptop open again and typed a single line into my notebook, Project Aurora, Day 1. I smiled, took a deep breath, and kept typing. Days at the cafe turned into weeks, and I slowly settled into a routine. Mornings were spent fixing leaky faucets and cleaning out grease traps, afternoons serving coffee to hurried tech workers, and long nights refining my Aurora project in the quiet corner booth after closing. Chuck, the cafe owner, had become a kind of unlikely mentor. He had a gruff exterior, but there was warmth beneath it, the kind that came from decades of hard work and weathered optimism. He never pried into my past, but he noticed my late-night work sessions, the blueprints scattered across the small table, the quiet muttering as I ran calculations in my head. One night, as I was tweaking a circuit design for my prototype, Chuck shuffled over with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He set one down in front of me, his hand lingering for a moment as if he was debating whether to speak. "You know," he said, settling into the seat across from me, "I used to be an engineer." I looked up, surprised. "Really?" "Yeah," he said, his gaze distant for a moment. "Mechanical. Spent years working in auto manufacturing before I bought this place." He took a long sip of his coffee. "Sometimes I miss it. Building things, solving problems." I hesitated, then pushed my blueprints toward him. "I'm trying to design a new kind of battery, one that can store renewable energy more efficiently. It's still rough, but I think it could work." Chuck leaned in, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the sketches. I watched his face, searching for any sign of skepticism or doubt, but all I saw was a slow, spreading smile. "This is good," he said, his finger tracing one of the rough power distribution diagrams. "Really good. But you'll need to work on your heat dissipation. You've got too much energy loss in these layers." I blinked, caught off guard. "You understand this?" He chuckled, tapping the side of his head. "Once an engineer, always an engineer." He leaned back, his eyes thoughtful. "You know, if you can actually make this work, you'll need funding. And connections. The tech world can be brutal for outsiders." I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. I had no connections, no funding, no name that carried any weight outside the cold marble halls of my father's mansion. But I had my ideas, my stubborn determination, and now maybe a small ally in this battle. The next morning, as I was wiping down tables before the cafe opened, a tall, sharp-eyed man in his late 30s walked in. He wore a crisp button-down shirt and carried a leather laptop bag slung over one shoulder. He ordered a black coffee and settled into a corner booth, his fingers already tapping furiously at his sleek MacBook. I brought him his coffee, noticing the complex circuit diagrams on his screen as I set the cup down. I hesitated, my engineering instincts sparking at the familiar patterns of power grids and energy transfer models. "Excuse me," I said, my voice a little too eager. "Is that a power distribution model for a multi-layer energy system?" He looked up, surprised. "You know about this?" I straightened, trying not to sound as nervous as I felt. "Yeah, I studied energy systems in college. Your design has a few points that could be optimized. If you reduce the intermediary layers here," I pointed to a section of his screen, "you could improve efficiency and reduce heat buildup." He blinked, clearly not expecting a waitress to critique his engineering designs. Then slowly, a smile spread across his face. "I'm Neil," he said, extending a hand. "Lead engineer at Solenoid Tech. We're working on a next-gen battery design, but we're stuck on a few key problems. If you're serious about what you just said, I'd love to hear your ideas." My heart raced, my mind already racing through the dozens of sketches I had scribbled over the past few weeks. "I'd love to. Just give me a minute." I ran to the back, washed my hands quickly, and returned to his table, my laptop tucked under my arm. I pulled up my Aurora designs, my fingers trembling slightly as I scrolled through the diagrams. For the next 2 hours, we bounced ideas back and forth, sketching on napkins, tweaking digital models, and debating the pros and cons of various energy distribution methods. Neil seemed genuinely impressed, his eyes lighting up each time I suggested a small but critical improvement to his designs. Finally, as the lunchtime rush began to trickle in, he leaned back, his coffee long gone, his eyes still sparkling with the thrill of fresh ideas. "You've got a sharp mind, Margaret," he said, slipping a business card across the table. "Come by the office on Monday. I want you to meet someone." I took the card, my heart pounding as I read the embossed logo. Solenoid Tech, Neil Chang, lead engineer. For the first time in weeks, I felt a crack of light in the darkness. I had a meeting, a potential connection, a real chance at something more than just surviving. That night, as I cleaned up after closing, Chuck caught my eye from behind the counter. His usually gruff expression softened by a small, knowing smile. "Don't forget us little people when you hit it big, kid," he said, tossing a dish rag over his shoulder. I laughed, my cheeks flushing with a mixture of pride and nervous anticipation. Wouldn't dream of it. As I walked out into the cool San Jose night, my backpack slung over one shoulder. Neil's business card carefully tucked into my pocket, I whispered to myself, "This is it. The first step." I tightened my grip on my backpack strap, my mind already racing with plans, ideas, and calculations. I had taken the first step. Now, all I had to do was keep moving. Monday came faster than I expected. I had barely slept the night before, my mind buzzing with excitement and anxiety. I kept flipping through my Aurora notes, tweaking schematics, and revising my project pitch until the early hours. When the alarm finally rang, my eyes felt like sandpaper, but the fire in my chest kept me moving. I took the bus to the address on Neil's business card, a nondescript building in an industrial part of town. It wasn't the sleek, glass-paneled tech hub I had imagined, but it had the faint hum of potential. I walked through the glass doors, my backpack slung over my shoulder, trying to ignore the way my heart hammered against my ribs. Inside, the air buzzed with the quiet chaos of innovation. Whiteboards covered in scrawled equations, desks cluttered with half-disassembled circuit boards, and the faint metallic smell of freshly soldered wires. Neil met me in the lobby, a wide grin on his face as he ushered me through the maze of desks and computer monitors. "Welcome to Solenoid Tech," he said. His voice bright with the kind of energy only an engineer can muster when they're on the brink of something big. He led me into a cramped conference room, the walls covered in whiteboards filled with scribbled equations, half-finished circuit diagrams, and hastily drawn power distribution models. Sitting at the far end of the table was a woman in her early 40s, her dark hair pulled back into a tight ponytail, her eyes sharp and calculating as they flicked up to meet mine. "Margaret, this is Dr. Monica Tran, our Chief Technology Officer." Neil said, his tone suddenly more formal. "She's the brains behind our entire energy storage division." I extended my hand, trying not to let my nerves show. Monica took it, her grip firm and precise, her eyes never leaving mine. "So," she said, leaning back in her chair, her fingers steepled under her chin. "Neil says you have some interesting ideas about power distribution and heat management. Why don't you show me what you've got?" I swallowed hard, my pulse thundering in my ears as I pulled out my laptop. I flipped it open, my fingers moving on autopilot as I navigated to my Aurora files. I had spent countless nights refining these designs, tweaking every line, every calculation, every possible flaw. But suddenly, sitting under the sharp gaze of a tech industry veteran, my carefully constructed ideas felt fragile and uncertain. I cleared my throat, forcing myself to focus. My project is called Aurora. It's a new type of energy storage system designed to significantly reduce heat dissipation and energy loss during charge cycles. The core concept revolves around a layered pressure-neutral distribution chamber that allows for more efficient energy transfer while maintaining a stable thermal environment. I tapped a few keys, bringing up a 3D model of my design. The digital rendering spun slowly on the screen, the inner layers of the battery glowing in soft blues and greens as the simulated power pulses through the system. Monica leaned in, her eyes narrowing as she studied the design. "Interesting," she said, her tone neutral but not dismissive. "And what about the material composition? How are you planning to manage thermal expansion and pressure imbalances during peak load?" I hesitated for a fraction of a second, then quickly pulled up a spreadsheet of potential materials I had been researching. "I'm proposing a composite blend with high thermal conductivity but low expansion coefficients. It's still experimental, but I believe it could stabilize the core temperature without compromising power output. Neil shot me a quick approving glance. Monica remained silent for a long, tension-filled moment, her eyes flicking between the screen and my face as if weighing my words against her own years of experience. Finally, she leaned back, a small, grudging smile pulling at the corner of her mouth. "Not bad," she said, crossing her arms over her chest. "You clearly understand the fundamentals. But you're going to need more than just theory to make this work in the real world. Are you ready to get your hands dirty?" I felt a surge of adrenaline, my earlier nerves melting away. "Absolutely." Monica glanced at Neil, who gave her a quick nod. She turned back to me, her eyes sharp. "All right, Margaret, you're in. We'll put you on a trial period. Impress me, and maybe we can talk about something more permanent." For the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself breathe. I had a chance, a real chance, to prove myself, to build something from the ground up, to turn my rough sketches and late-night scribbles into a tangible, world-changing reality. The next few weeks were a blur of long hours, late nights, and caffeine-fueled brainstorming sessions. I became a fixture in the solenoid tech lab, surrounded by whiteboards covered in equations, prototypes sparking on metal workbenches, and the constant hum of high-powered fans trying to keep the place from overheating. Monica pushed me hard, testing my ideas at every turn, questioning every assumption, every calculation. At times, I felt like I was drowning in a sea of technical jargon and conflicting design constraints. But each time I hit a wall, I forced myself to push through, to find a solution, to prove that I belonged in this world. One evening, as I was running the 5th thermal simulation of the day, Neil dropped into the chair beside me, his face flushed with excitement. "We did it," he said, his voice a harsh whisper. "The new prototype hit 96% efficiency on the test bench. That's a 20% increase over our last design." I blinked, my mind slow to process the numbers. "Wait, you're serious?" He grinned, clapping me on the shoulder. "Dead serious. Monica's running the numbers again, but if this holds up, we might actually have a viable product." I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding as the weight of his words hit me. This was it. The first real breakthrough, the first tangible proof that my ideas weren't just empty dreams, that I could actually build something that mattered. As Neil walked away, already rattling off potential marketing angles to one of the project managers, I leaned over my laptop and typed a single line into my Aurora project file: "Breakthrough confirmed. 96% efficiency." I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let out a long, shaky breath. For the first time since I had stepped off that bus in San Jose, I felt like I was winning. The breakthrough with the Aurora prototype sparked a fire in the lab. The air hummed with the kind of frantic, hopeful energy that only comes when you're on the verge of something truly transformative. Monica, usually stern and guarded, cracked a rare smile as she reviewed the latest test results, her sharp eyes scanning the data with growing approval. The numbers didn't lie. Our efficiency had hit 96%, a figure that no one in the industry had ever reached. It was the kind of leap forward that could change the entire renewable energy sector, and we all felt it. But with that breakthrough came pressure. A kind I hadn't felt since my father tossed those crumpled bills at my feet. The stakes were higher now. If we failed, it wouldn't just be a personal disappointment. It would be a public, humiliating collapse. Monica pulled me aside one evening, her eyes serious as she leaned against the lab's glass partition. "You're doing great, Margaret, but remember, this isn't just about the tech. Investors are going to want a story. They need to believe not just in the product, but in you." I frowned, my hands still hovering over the exposed circuits of our latest prototype. "What do you mean?" She crossed her arms, her gaze intense. "The tech world is full of promising ideas, but only a few survive the brutal reality of the market. If you want this to go big, you need to step up. Be the face of this project. People don't just invest in technology, they invest in the people behind it." I felt a pang of doubt, the familiar shadow of my father's disapproval creeping into my mind. I had always been the quiet one, the girl who preferred equations over small-talk, design over debate. But Monica was right. If I wanted to prove myself, to truly leave my father's shadow behind, I had to own this project, not just in the lab, but in the spotlight. A few days later, Neil burst into the lab, his face flushed with excitement. "Margaret, you need to see this." He led me to his workstation, where a live feed from a tech conference in Palo Alto was playing. The camera panned across a stage where a sharply dressed CEO from a rival company was presenting their latest battery technology, a sleek, polished product that boasted impressive numbers but still lagged behind our Aurora prototype. Neil paused the video, his finger hovering over a set of specs on the screen. They're talking about 85% efficiency, a price point 3 times what we're targeting, and a shelf life half of what Aurora can offer. If we move fast, we can beat them to market. I leaned in, my mind racing. This was it, our window, our chance to disrupt the market and stake our claim as innovators, not just followers. All right, I said, my voice steady with newfound determination. Then let's move. I want a working demo ready for the next investor meeting. If we're going to make a splash, we need to hit them where it hurts. Performance and price. Neil grinned, his eyes gleaming. I knew you'd say that. The next few weeks were a blur of late nights, rapid prototyping, and countless simulations. The lab became my second home, the smell of solder and burning circuits mingling with the bitter tang of endless cups of coffee. I pushed myself harder than ever, refusing to let doubt or exhaustion slow me down. And then finally the day came. Monica called me into her office, her face unreadable as she gestured for me to sit. She slid a thick envelope across the desk, her manicured fingers tapping impatiently as I opened it. Inside was a formal letter from the Stanford Innovation Hub inviting us to present Aurora at their upcoming tech showcase, one of the biggest platforms for emerging technologies in the world. They want you to present, Monica said, her eyes locking onto mine. Not me. Not Neil. You. I felt my pulse quicken, my hands shaking slightly as I set the letter down. Me, but why? She leaned forward, her gaze piercing. Because you're the one who built this. You're the one who came in here with a crazy idea and turned it into something real. Investors want to see passion, vision, the person behind the numbers. I swallowed hard, my mind already flashing back to the countless nights I had spent alone in the corner booth of Rust and Bean, scribbling notes on napkins, my laptop screen glowing in the dim light. All right, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'll do it. The next few weeks passed in a blur of rehearsals, slide deck revisions, and late-night brainstorming sessions. Monica drilled me on my presentation, her sharp critiques pushing me to polish every word, every pause, every slide transition. Neil offered technical insights, fine-tuning the demo to ensure our numbers dazzled even the most skeptical investors. Finally, the day arrived. I stepped onto the stage at the Stanford Innovation Hub, the bright spotlights blinding me for a moment as I looked out over the sea of expectant faces, investors, journalists, tech gurus, and a few familiar faces from my old university. I took a deep breath, the cool, sterile air of the auditorium filling my lungs, and began. Good morning, everyone. My name is Margaret, and today I want to introduce you to Aurora, a breakthrough in energy storage technology that has the potential to reshape how we power our world. The room fell silent, the low hum of anticipation almost tangible as I clicked through my slides, each carefully crafted image and bullet point, building a narrative of innovation, disruption, and limitless potential. When I reached the live demo, my heart raced as I watched the numbers climb on the monitor behind me. 96%, 97%, 98% efficiency. The room erupted into applause, a few investors leaning forward, their eyes wide with surprise and interest. I finished my presentation, my final words ringing through the auditorium. Aurora isn't just another battery, it's the future of clean energy. A future where we don't just talk about change but actually build it. As I stepped off the stage, my hands still trembling, Monica met me in the wings, a rare, genuine smile breaking through her usually stern expression. You did it, Margaret, she said, clapping me on the shoulder. You really did it. I felt a wave of relief and pride wash over me, my mind already racing with the possibilities ahead. I had taken my first step out of my father's shadow, my first step toward building something truly my own, and I wasn't going to stop. The aftermath of my presentation at the Stanford Innovation Hub felt like a whirlwind. Investors flooded our inboxes. Journalists reached out for interviews, and tech blogs lit up with articles about the next big thing in energy storage. Aurora had officially arrived. We secured our first major funding round just a few weeks later, a staggering $5 million from a clean energy venture capital firm. The funds allowed us to move out of the cramped lab and into a proper research facility, complete with industrial-grade equipment and a small but dedicated team of engineers. Monica became my unofficial mentor, guiding me through the harsh realities of running a startup, managing budgets, negotiating contracts, and navigating the unpredictable waters of investor relations. Neil, ever the optimist, took on the role of Chief Technical Officer, his relentless energy driving the team through the long caffeine-fueled nights as we refined our designs and prepared for full-scale production. As Aurora Dynamics grew, so did my confidence. I found my voice, my place in the tech world, and a growing sense of purpose. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free, no longer defined by the expectations of my family or the limitations of my past. Then one crisp October morning, as I was reviewing the latest production reports in my small corner office, an email arrived that made my heart skip a beat. The subject line read, "Preston Equity faces takeover risk." I clicked it open, my pulse quickening as I skimmed the article. My father's firm, the same empire he had thrown me out of with nothing but a wad of crumpled bills, was on the brink of collapse. Years of outdated investment strategies, a stubborn refusal to adapt to changing markets, and the quiet erosion of client trust had finally caught up with him. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes unfocused as the memories came rushing back. The cold marble floors of my childhood home, my father's icy stare, the sharp slap of cash against polished stone. I had built Aurora from nothing, risen from the ashes of my father's rejection. And now, fate had handed me the opportunity to reclaim my name on my own terms. A few days later, I sat down with Monica and Neil in our glass-walled conference room, the San Francisco skyline stretching out behind us, the bay glittering in the afternoon sun. "I want to acquire Preston Equity," I said, my voice steady. Neil nearly choked on his coffee. "You want to what?" Monica's sharp eyes narrowed. "Why? That's a financial firm. It has nothing to do with what we're building." I leaned forward, my fingers steepled in front of me. "Exactly. We take them over, restructure their entire portfolio around green tech investments, and use their financial muscle to scale Aurora globally. It's a win for us, a lifeline for them, and a powerful statement to the entire industry." Neil shook his head, still processing the shock. Monica, however, leaned back, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. "You want to take the empire your father built and turn it into a force for good?" she said, a hint of admiration in her voice. "That's bold. Risky but bold." I met her gaze, my heart pounding. "I've been running from my family's shadow my whole life. It's time to face it head-on." We moved fast, assembling a small team of financial experts and corporate lawyers. Over the next few months, we quietly bought up shares, secured controlling interests through shell companies, and slowly tightened our grip around Preston Equity's throat. The final piece fell into place one rainy afternoon when I received a call from Warren Stokes, the firm's vice chairman, a man I remembered from my childhood as one of my father's most trusted advisors. "Ms. Margaret Preston," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "I believe it's time we talked." 2 days later, I walked into the marble lobby of Preston Equity's headquarters, the same building my father had once ruled like a king. The air felt different this time, not the cold, oppressive weight of my childhood, but a strange electric charge, as if the very walls sensed the coming storm. Warren met me in the boardroom, his expression wary as I took my seat at the long, polished table. "Ms. Preston," he said, his eyes sharp behind his silver-rimmed glasses. "I must admit, I didn't expect this." I smiled, setting my briefcase on the table. Most people don't. We spent the next hour negotiating the final terms of the acquisition. Warren's cool professionalism barely masking his growing unease as I laid out my vision for the firm. A complete overhaul from top to bottom, refocusing their vast financial resources on clean energy, sustainable technology, and long-term innovation. Finally, as the ink dried on the last of the contracts, Warren leaned back, his fingers drumming nervously against the tabletop. "Your father," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully, "isn't going to take this well." I met his gaze, my own eyes hard. He made his choice. Now I'm making mine. The official announcement hit the news the next morning. Aurora Dynamics acquires Preston Equity Pivot's firm to clean energy investments. The tech world erupted in surprise, the financial press scrambled for insights, and my father's name trended on social media for the first time in decades, but not as the financial titan he had once been, but as the man who had underestimated his own daughter. A week later, I received a single envelope in the mail. Thick cream-colored paper, my father's neat, controlled handwriting on the front. Inside was a short, handwritten note. "Margaret, you've made your point. I underestimated you, but don't forget where you came from. Edward." I read the note twice, the words strangely hollow, as if my father still couldn't quite grasp what I had become. I set the letter down, my heart strangely calm. I had reclaimed my name not as a Preston, but as the founder of Aurora, a name that stood for something more than old money and broken promises. I closed my office blinds, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across my desk, and leaned back in my chair, my fingers laced behind my head. I had won, and this time it was on my own terms. Story 2. Brooke is my name. I am the CEO of a large medical supply firm in Seattle, and I am 33 years old. I've dedicated the last 10 years to developing my profession, taking last-minute business trips, working over the weekend, and forgoing every vacation in order to advance in the company. I don't have a spouse, children, or time for casual interactions with my coworkers. The icy woman who comes first and goes last is me. But I'm only the stand-in for my family. Out of my 3 sisters, I am the oldest. Madison, 27, teaches preschool in the Spokane suburbs. Natalie, 25, just married, and 6 months pregnant, is the youngest of a married couple with twin boys. They both reside in Tacoma, close to our parents' house, and they have one clear trait in common. They contact me whenever they need a babysitter. This Saturday, are you able to watch the children? Over the past year, I've heard that question at least 30 times. Sometimes it's immediately following a taxing 18-hour flight, and other times it's when I'm getting ready for a significant presentation. I usually say yes, though. I was self-sufficient when I was younger. While she worked on Madison's allergies or helped Natalie learn to read, my mom frequently left me to deal with problems alone. I received a full scholarship to college and managed to support myself without the assistance of anyone save for that strong eldest, who never asks for aid. Everyone started using my image as a justification to believe that I could always provide more. I recall waking up around 5 in the morning on Mom's birthday last year. To prepare supper, pick up my nephews from school, wrap presents for Madison, and bake a cake. Madison and Natalie were laughing with family members in the living room when the celebration began, and I was in the kitchen chopping fruit. One thing my mother said was that Brooke is usually very considerate. You have my admiration. However, such pride was never accompanied by true comprehension. And me? It's been 4 years since I had a true vacation. I just organized a trip to Hawaii with a colleague. After contracting the illness, Madison contacted and asked if I could just lend a hand for 3 days. The ticket was canceled. The vacation is over. I have no grudges toward my nephews. I can't even admit how much I adore them. However, such affection shouldn't be taken advantage of, particularly if it's viewed as an obligation. When Natalie continued blowing up my phone during a video conversation on a Tuesday morning, I began to realize this. When I responded, fearing anything was amiss, she said rather casually, "Can you come watch Minnie? I'm going to the spa with a pal." After pausing, I laughed dryly. "For that you're calling me during the meeting," Natalie laughed. "You're not dating. What may occupy your time?" My phone was placed on the table. In their eyes, the thoughtless yet recognizable line went deeper than it should have. My life meant having no family and no children? Didn't matter. I wasn't asked whether I was exhausted. If I had a life of my own, nobody gave a damn. They simply thought of me as the one who was always available. I became invisible as a result. I started to question whether I would eventually vanish from this circle of accountability. Would my family members even notice? My phone started vibrating when I was getting ready to deliver the quarterly report at work. Madison was the one. Unless it was an urgent matter, she seldom ever phoned during business hours. "The children are ill, much like Brooke. Are you able to pick them up?" "Hey!" I unmuted my laptop and replied, "What is going on? How are you?" Madison had a honey-sweet voice. I just had a small question. I sighed, remaining composed. "What is it?" You aware that Mom will shortly reach 60? For her, we have a really special event planned. Everyone is helping to create something truly remarkable. However, it is quite expensive." She hesitated as though she was anticipating my reaction. "Indeed," I bit my lip. "What is the amount?" "Oh, around $400 or $500. As if it were coffee money, she said. "Don't worry, however. Natalie and I have already contributed. To cover the remainder, you only need to donate around $3,000. I almost dropped my phone. That's almost a whole month's rent for my flat in downtown Seattle. $3,000. Will a rock band be hired? Addison chuckled. No, but this is a significant occasion. Mom has always wished for everyone to be together, you know. Is it transferable? I glanced at the red-glowed hospital budget on my computer screen. The trip to Colorado that I had planned for March would obviously have to wait. As usual. All right, I answered in a bland voice. Give me the information. I received the message a second later. Oh, and make sure you take the whole week off from the 12th to the 18th, Madison continued. Avoid scheduling any business travel. The schedule is packed with events. I gave a robotic nod. All right. I didn't even have time to inquire about the planet's location or its purpose because everything happened so quickly. A whole week, but I said nothing as usual. That was nothing new to them. I attempted to bring it up during calls the following week, but Madison and Natalie continued to sidestep the subject. The specifics are still being finalized. Nearing completion. All you have to do is conserve your energy so you can play with the children. While bouncing a crying infant in her arms, Madison said casually during a FaceTime call. I became uncomfortable. Nobody explained the strategy to me in detail. Regarding Mom's birthday, I didn't even get included to a group chat or get an email. All of my knowledge was hazy and disjointed. The truth was then revealed at a weekend supper at our parents' place. Natalie clapped her hands as I set a salad bowl on the table. Everyone, big news. It's official. We will all be staying at Moonberry Lodge in Montana next week. There is snow all over, private bungalows and hot springs. The table exploded. Mom smiled. The girls began discussing what color ski coats to bring after Dad gave Madison a pat on the back. I went cold. Wait, I said, Moonberry Lodge. Nobody informed me of the precise dates or the place. I haven't even made a travel reservation. Madison paused, glancing at Natalie. The energy wavered. Mom turned to face me after clearing her throat. Her eyes were far away. The problem is that everything has been planned, Brooke. We truly want Mom to be able to unwind without worrying, and the kids need someone. Would you please do the family a great favor? I put down my glass of water. You mean I stay behind to supervise 5 kids while everyone else travels to Montana? Natalie smiled nervously. The children adore you, you know. You don't actually know anyone there, to be honest. The mountains would be boring for you. I was taken aback. It was all evident at that instant. I had been left out from the beginning. Despite being the largest contributor, I was never included in their trip, but the money I gave helped cover some of the costs. I was the ideal unpaid nanny, free, trustworthy, and single. My expression changed, but no one saw. Or perhaps they simply disregarded it. When I inquired gently, "Did any of you think that maybe this time I'd say no?" the room fell into an odd hush. Nobody responded. As if it were the most intriguing thing in the world, Madison picked at her salad. With her fork, Natalie played. Mom let out a sigh, assuming the part of the defenseless mother with the challenging daughter. I hold the napkin on my lap and straighten my back. Thus, everything is prearranged. Tickets are purchased and the schedule is established. And nobody even considered asking whether I wanted to participate. You wouldn't like it anyhow, my dad said as he looked up from his glass of wine. It's chilly, loud and crowded. You enjoy stillness. I let out a hollow, resentful laugh. Therefore, I'm immediately disqualified because I don't have a husband or children. Simply due to the fact that I am not like my sisters. I am not eligible for this vacation. Be less sensitive. Flatly, Mom said, because you're skilled at it, they entrust you with the children. Everybody has a role. My part. I looked her in the eyes and repeated, what precisely am I supposed to do? The person who provides childcare and payment so my sisters can unwind? Annoyed, Natalie raised her head. You act as though we're taking advantage of you. In addition to stress, we have our own families. It's only a week. You don't really lack the time. I gripped my hands and tried to maintain a steady voice as I said, it's not about not having time. It's about not feeling like I'm a part of the plan, not being asked and not being invited. Mom sighed deeply and shook her head. You're like this all the time, Brooke, presenting yourself as the victim at all times. I leaned toward the table and pushed my chair back. I am not a victim. No. However, I'm also not an unseen assistant you can call upon whenever the family needs someone to make a sacrifice. After turning, I left the dining room. Everyone remained seated. Nobody trailed behind. Don't apologize. Not even a regretful look. Mom said something loud enough for me to hear as I reached for my coat beside the door. In a few days, she will cool off. She does it every time. This time I didn't calm off before closing the door. I had trouble sleeping that night. As I walked my apartment, I reflected on all the occasions I had to postpone dates due to Natalie's need for a babysitter. Even though everyone else was laughing in the living room, I was the only one in the kitchen on the restless evenings when Madison phoned to hurry and pick up the boys for the holidays. When I eventually raised my voice, they accused me of being overly sensitive. I brewed coffee the following morning, turned on my laptop and quietly typed, "Resort beside the beach, in March." I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't staying here to babysit for a trip I wasn't even invited to. I brought up my phone and reviewed my schedule for that week. I was going to block aside vacation time just like they asked, but for the first time in years, I thought otherwise. I would take that time off, but not to babysit and not in the city. I booked a flight. Not much, but enough to make me feel like I was at last taking care of myself. No one was expecting me to explain why I wasn't picking up my phone at a bright beach hotel overlooking the ocean. I glanced at the screen as I wrote out my email requesting time off. I had the impression that I was recovering a forgotten aspect of myself. They will be taken aback. They will be upset. They'll accuse me of being ungrateful. I don't care though this time. I've lived my entire life for other people. Time to live for myself. I saw the sunshine from Seattle stream through transparent curtains as I sat by my living room window on Sunday morning. My thoughts was clear after a restless night. Clear as ice. I had lost my confusion. There was just one thing I knew. I had had enough of being the oldest sister who sacrificed. I phoned my mother. The third ring was heard by her. Brooke. Her voice was flat as she spoke. I considered taking a trip next week. I started speaking in a forceful yet calm tone. I'm not going to remain behind to watch the kids. Quiet. Instead, I went on. A reputable qualified professional sitter will be my hire. In this manner, everyone can still enjoy the vacation while the children are carefully taken care of. Mom's voice abruptly became harsh as she answered slowly. Is a stranger being hired to monitor the children? Do you believe they'll feel at ease with a stranger? I responded. Mom, I need to sleep too. And this is the most sensible course of action if everyone's enjoyment of the vacation is the main goal. No, she interrupted me. It's completely nonsensical. You have time, you've got the resources. When you could obviously help, why not? This isn't helping anymore, so I bit my lip. It is being exploited. Before I could continue, she ended the call. My phone buzzed again not 5 minutes later. Natalie, why on earth are you doing this? When I took her up, she snapped. I'm trying to figure out how to make the vacation enjoyable for everyone without having someone be the lamb sacrificed, I said, maintaining a level voice. Nobody is forcing you to make any sacrifices, she shouted. You behave as though we are tying you to a cross. In the meanwhile, you and I are balancing houses, children, and ourselves. What since I don't have a spouse or children, I cut in, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks. I'm not allowed to feel fatigued. I am unable to go on vacation. I'm not worthy of being treated like a member of the family. Natalie snorted. You're exaggerating. The world seems to revolve around you all the time. This isn't drama, Natalie. This is me at last realizing how valuable I am. And I refuse to be treated like a tool ever again. The person on the other end paused. Her voice then became icy. If you decline to assist, when the entire family abandons, you don't be shocked. See, Mom is crying. I hope you're content. As I put the phone down, my hand shook. For the first time in years, however, it wasn't fear or guilt. It came from at last escaping the invisible prison I had placed myself in. I didn't get any more calls all day. However, Madison's text came flooding in. It's unbelievable that you would ruin Mom's birthday in this way, after all that Natalie has done for you. Will Aunt Helen be able to keep you asleep at night if Mom's blood pressure rises as a result? It is the oldest responsibility to help the younger ones. Brooke, remember your roots. Every line was read by them, like a paper cut each one. But I felt relief rather than anguish. I didn't respond. Rather, I confirmed my Santa Monica beachfront hotel reservation. Included is a full spa package. My reading list was created. I made a reservation for a walking tour at sunrise, and most importantly, I switched off my phone. In airplane mode. I prepared a decent supper for myself that evening, lighted candles, and listened to soothing jazz. No wailing infants. Could you please assist me immediately? There was no unseen burden on my shoulders as I had assumed. One thing is certain, even though I have no idea what will happen next. They can no longer dictate to me and expect me to comply without question. The salty sea wind kissed my cheeks like a soft embrace from freedom when I got off the plane in San Diego 2 days later. At the last minute, I had chosen California over Florida only because I wanted to do something totally different even for myself. In La Jolla, I leased a modest apartment with a view of the coast. Still plenty to sleep in. enough to prevent me from feeling isolated. I entered with a crossbody bag and a small luggage. I didn't require much. I wasn't bringing along coloring books, snacks, or diaper bags this time. Only sunscreen. A fresh pair of flip-flops with an unread book. I opened the door to the balcony. I took a big breath and realized that, for the first time in years, there were no family calls or texts. No. Brooke, could you? My footsteps pressed into the wet sand as I strolled down the shore the following morning. The sea was streaked with amber and gold as the sun rose slowly. For the first time, I sipped my coffee while sitting on a wooden bench with a view of the ocean and thinking just about myself. It didn't make me feel bad. My first day was spent seeing Old Town San Diego, where I passed rows of small stores offering handcrafted products along cobblestone streets. I purchased a silver bracelet that has the Italian phrase "Libertà Freedom" etched on it. I told the shopkeeper, "This is the first time I've ever treated myself," and she grinned. I had dinner at a seafood restaurant on the bay that night. I felt calm settling into every part of me as I sat by myself in the comfortable room. I didn't have to wipe a weeping child's face. Nobody broke off to discuss marital drama or house repairs. Nobody thought of me as the fallback option. In the third day's morning, I looked at my phone. Mom hadn't missed any calls, but the voicemail box was full. Almost 100 messages, primarily from Natalie Madison and a few family members. The screen was illuminated by the first few sentences. "Where are you, Natalie? The children have already been dropped off at your house. Madison, to what extent do you intend to pursue this, Brooke? Mom, you kept it a secret from everyone. I'm really let down." Like a completed novel, I put my phone down. I wasn't upset. I was really astounded that they were still not understanding. Or perhaps never desired to, because I wasn't following their script anymore. I sat down with my favorite bowl of cereal, turned on the TV, and selected a gentle documentary. I didn't check any of the messages, but they continued rolling in. On the fourth day, I put my phone on silent for good. I hired a bike and went for a ride around Pacific Beach that afternoon. My hair was blown by the seaside breeze. I grinned as the sunlight touched my cheeks. For the first time since that terrible supper, I genuinely smiled. Liberty. Like a present I had never previously dared to offer myself. I thought of the children as I sat on the balcony and watched the sunset on the evening of day 5. Lily's gap-toothed smile and Jake's large, wide eyes. Sophie's habit of clinging to my shirt in times of fear. Although I missed them, I didn't miss having to make sacrifices. I missed the times when I voluntarily provided rather than when I felt pressured to. I was aware that as kids grew older, they would question why Aunt Brooke was no longer around. By then, I thought they would see that a woman who says no is not being cruel and that love does not need quiet tolerance. She is courageous. I prepared to head back to Seattle by packing early on the morning of day 6. I was prepared not because I missed home, all set to take on them, all set to talk, all set to draw the line on the return flight. Behind me, the sky and water merged as I gazed out the window. I was fully aware that I would not be the Brooke they knew once I got off the aircraft, and that was all right. My phone was overflowing with alerts the morning I got back to Seattle. Upon exiting the airport after over a week without electricity, it began to buzz continuously, like to a warning siren for the impending storm. I opened the screen. Madison's first message. "You're where when we arrived at your residence, nobody was there. Natalie is causing Jake and Mason to get irritable. Could this be a joke?" At that point, you realized we had to head out for Mom. "Give me a call, Brooke. I have no idea what's happening." I watched the stream of texts continue as I climbed into the cab. "You think we'll drag all these bags to God knows where and 5 children? It's unbelievable that you accomplished this, Madison." Natalie. "You have greatly disappointed me." Mom. I inhaled deeply and closed my eyes. I had prepared all the justifications and explanations, abruptly overwhelmed by a surge of fatigue. After just 1 week of living for myself, they were already attempting to reintegrate me into that previous job. The responsible one, the fixer, the replacement. I arrived home to find my mailbox full. Sticky notes were affixed to the door instead of letters. We stopped by. However, you weren't present. Mom broke down. The children inquired as to Aunt Brooke's absence. There was also a greeting from Aunt Frances, who I only saw at Christmas. It interrupted the entire journey. "Now your mom can't sleep." I went inside, hung my coat, and kicked off my shoes. I left everything just as I found it. "Nice. Keep quiet." No complaints, no yelling kids, and above all, no one treating me like the go-to person for the family's issues. I listened to the voicemails as I opened my phone once again. Natalie's voice sounded like a razor. "You're light. Mom feels deceived. Do you even understand that in front of our relatives, the entire family feels embarrassed? All eyes were on you, and then you simply vanished. As if we were unimportant." Madison's angry whisper followed. "Our months-long holiday plans are ruined by you." With Aunt Brooke in mind, Jake has been sobbing. "How do you get any sleep at all?" None of them received a response from me. Since I wasn't what they truly missed, I also didn't apologize. It was the version of myself that blindly obeyed commands. I opened a bottle of wine that evening. As usual, the city was glittering from my balcony. But everything had changed for me. In my little flat in quiet, I was aware that I had passed a threshold. It is a threshold of freedom rather than resistance. I was watering my plants on the terrace the following morning when my mother sent me a message. "I'm at a loss for words if you feel that you're no longer a member of this family." For the first time in my life, I put the phone down. I understood that true family doesn't use guilt to control. Therefore, those comments didn't hurt. The foundation of a true family is mutual understanding and the decision to support one another. Not demands without conditions. I launched my laptop and enrolled in a class on night photography. I then looked for a European summer tour. I didn't seek advice from anyone. I acted without waiting for approval. I simply did it out of want. I was in the kitchen brewing tea less than 24 hours after I got home when I heard a rattling at the front door. I initially believed that someone had the wrong address, but then there was a clear intentional click and the lock turned. The door opened immediately as I entered the hallway, just in case my mother was standing there with the emergency key I had given her years ago. At one point, she claimed that Madison and Natalie were behind her. They were all three flushed with icy rage, or both. "How long did you intend to stay away from us?" Mom inquired. Not even a greeting. No justification. She spoke in a voice as icy as the snow outside. They entered the entryway in this manner even though I hadn't invited them inside. Their map of control included home. Madison put her fists on her hips, slammed her bag onto the chair, and scowled. "You abruptly left 5 children. We stood in the snow at your door, not a message. Don't apologize. Do you think that's acceptable?" I leaned on the kitchen counter with my arms folded. Nobody inquired about my agreement. You allocated responsibilities, devised strategies, and gave me the most difficult task, then became irate when I refused to comply. "Do you consider it to be normal?" With her face hot, Natalie leaped in. "You were helpful once. How did you get so cold-hearted?" As was customary, I looked at my sister and spoke quietly when I was assisting. I came to the realization that I would never be able to say no again if I didn't say no this time. Mom stood with her arms folded, looking around my flat as if she were evaluating everything. Then slowly but sharply, as glass, she spoke. "Brooke, I never imagined you would become this sort of person. This family used to be proud of you." I chuckled, not loudly, not resentfully, simply the empty laugh of someone who had finally let go of a weight. Why was I usually the first person picked to make the sacrifice if I was the family's pride? Why had no one ever inquired about my desire to participate in the events? Or do you think I'm only important when I'm helpful? Madison's voice was shrill as she kicked the chair hard. "The trip was ruined by you." Mom was unable to appreciate it completely. "I had to stay at home and monitor the kids by myself since the entire family is a disaster. It's all your fault." I gave Madison a direct, unblinking stare. "What have I been doing for all these years in your opinion when you were ill? Who looked after your children? Every time there was a family get-together who prepared the food, Natalie had a last-minute spa appointment, so they had to reschedule their personal plans. You're so accustomed to getting that. You call it treachery when it ceases." Natalie took a step forward, tears in her eyes. "You've evolved. You weren't always this icy." "No," I answered quietly. "I've remained the same. I just no longer put up with it." For a few seconds, nobody said anything. Like a wake-up call, the quiet in the little chamber resounded. The hush was finally broken by my mother. "Maybe I was mistaken to think you were the one keeping us all together if you really think of this family as such a burden." I looked calmly and nodded. "You were wrong to treat that as a long-term commitment, but you weren't wrong to rely on me." Mom's eyes left mine and she turned away. "I have nothing else to say if that's your preference." Natalie and Madison also remained silent. They indicated that it was time to leave by picking up their luggage. No embrace. No hand contact. With a last heavy thump, the door slammed behind them. Not loud, not dramatic, yet weighty. For a minute, I remained still. Don't cry, not guilty, only lightness. Returning to the table, I poured a new cup of tea and gazed out the window. The snow was starting to melt outside. Beneath the fading white areas was lovely green grass. This winter will end differently, I knew. With release, not with collapse. With a rebirth, not a split. I took up my phone and discreetly exited the family group chat a week after the altercation. Not a message. No justification. I just pressed leave group and let out a sigh. No peeing in response. No massage. Why no calls? Nothing but quiet. The sort that says I don't matter if they can't control me anymore. For the first time, I started to reconstruct my life without focusing on the feelings or schedule of others. I got up early every morning, brewed coffee, and jotted down notes. Today, what do I want? Every day, the responses are different. A stroll in the park on some days, perhaps dining at a new restaurant on others. On other days, nobody had the right to interrupt you while you were reading till the sunset. I originally considered taking a Thursday night painting class to be a luxury, since I had to have my phone close at hand in case something went wrong with the kids. I painted freely now without hiding my weary eyes under happy pictures. I went to concerts by myself without making excuses, joined a reading club, and went to art exhibits on the weekends. And I came to the realization that solitude wasn't quite as frightening as I had been told. In June, I also began organizing my journey to Europe, first to Paris, then to Florence, and finally to Amsterdam. I've wanted to travel to these 3 dream locations since college, but I never felt I earned them. I didn't ask anyone's opinion this time. I didn't hold out for permission. As a promise, I printed the itinerary, made the airplane reservations, and affixed it to my refrigerator. I own this existence. I stopped posting hazy pictures of other people's children's birthday parties on social media. No more captions. Like a ton of fun. As I was struggling to keep my composure. It was now photos of me on a rooftop with a glass of wine. Seaside sunsets, my first completed painting in class. Additionally, the smile in those pictures was no longer for it. My mother was still missing. Those afternoons spent making apple pies together were missed. When I slept off on the couch, she covered me with a blanket. However, I also couldn't forget the day she mentioned that her eyes were chilly. I have nothing else to say if that's your preference. Some relationships end because of disrespect rather than a lack of affection. And where justice no longer existed, I had given up on finding love. I was seated in a little Fremont cafe one late March afternoon when I noticed a mother and daughter walk past the window. Giggling, the young girl pulled her mother's hand, and the mother leaned down to caress her hair with adoring eyes. My chest constricted, but something inside of me softly melted at the sight. I became aware that I had not lost any relatives. A part of my family that never really saw me was gone. I now have the opportunity to develop a new sort, one that begins with me. I unlocked emergency contacts on my phone that evening and deleted my mother's number. I no longer wanted to be someone's fallback option, not because I was hateful. Instead, I added a new contact, one of my art class friends, Marissa. She used to trek alone around Iceland as a photographer. I'm game if you need a travel companion for Florence. My heart felt warmer, she had murmured. Midnight was no longer the center of my existence. Hello, sister. Last minute pleas for childcare in between meetings or texts. It now encompassed timely meals, restful sleep, and open dialogue. UN pressed and refused to compromise. I'm not sure whether Madison and Natalie will ever comprehend what I've gone through or if Mom will ever knock again. However, I am aware of this. I'll welcome them politely if they come back. However, the default sacrifices will end. Sitting at my apartment window on the morning of April 1st, it struck me as sunlight poured like silk through the transparent drapes. At last, I had crossed a threshold. I had never previously ventured to approach. I once thought it was selfish to choose oneself. That is if I wasn't constantly accessible or willing to make sacrifices. When I was called by my family, I was a nasty guy. Throughout my adolescence, I confused volunteering with responsibility and love with duty. Now, however, everything seemed more obvious than before. I don't live for myself because I'm selfish. Since I always had the right to recall how I felt during those initial days in San Diego, I'm only honoring myself. uncomfortable, empty. I feel guilty. However, as time went on, each brief moment of independence showed me that one's value isn't determined by the amount of sacrifice one makes for others. It's because they genuinely live for themselves. I was no longer offended by the family's quiet. It actually allowed me to recover, to revise my narrative without the alterations caused by the expectations of others. I enumerated all I sacrificed for other people, canceled vacations and abandoned pastimes. I used to call those dreams unrealistic. I'm now reassembling them piece by piece, creating a new image of a woman who is aware that she is entitled to happiness without seeking approval. I began planning little weekend trips, easy climbs in the Skagit Valley at Rattlesnake Ledge, and visits to local farmers markets and tulip fields. Every month, I made it my mission to try something new, no matter how little or insignificant, as long as it made me happy. A girl at the adjacent table said to her companion, "I'm afraid that if I say no to my family, they'll think I'm selfish," as I was sitting at my favorite cafe one day. I grinned to myself. I was familiar with that sensation and understood that conquering it was the most difficult and liberating thing in the world. To the girl, they could say one thing: "You're not selfish in my opinion for selecting yourself. You don't have to apologize because you're living your truth." I knew in my heart that I would never wish to break off my family's bonds. I just couldn't sustain a relationship in which unconditional sacrifice was required and love was conditioned. I'll welcome them if they ever want to comprehend. If not, though, I won't turn around, because I will no longer live to prove myself to anyone. I'm here to enjoy every second of life, to create a life of which I am proud. I'm learning to love myself without passing judgment and with patience and gentleness. And that's the best basis for any future connection I've discovered. A voluntary bond between free-full individuals, not a mute sacrifice. Summer will be here soon. I'm prepared to start my ideal trip around Italy, so I've reserved a ticket to Florence. This was not intended for me. No messages requesting Brooke. Are you able to disrupting every moment of liberty? I wrote a little message for myself on my kitchen counter before I left Seattle. Greetings from home. Brooke, at last you made your own decision. I'm certain this time. I've never made a better choice in my life. The tale of Brooke serves as a potent reminder that self-love is not selfish. In a society that exalts quiet sacrifice, especially that of women, it is imperative. It takes courage to set limits and refuse requests. In order to recover her identity and create a life independent of other people's approval, Brooke deviated from her usual family role. She made the decision to live truthfully, completely, and most importantly for herself. How do you feel about Brooke's choice? Was this the only way she could really keep her peace, or was she being too strict? For more moving family tales like this one, leave a comment below, and remember to subscribe to the channel.